Good evening, everyone. Hopefully we're all coming through loud and clear, and a lot clearer than we were last week when we had what we can only describe as bandwidth issues of some description. But everything looks good at the moment. Our drop frames is a big fat 0, and everything's ticking over quite nicely. So welcome to the show. My name is Rob Puricelli, and I'm joined as ever by our fellow ProSynth Network admin team, owner and founder of the group, Ben Simpson, and Cryss over there in California. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. How are you?
Doing well over here. Glad to sit and chat another weekend.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
How's the situation over in America? I mean, we obviously see quite a bit of news over here, but how is it in your part of the world?
Well, probably a little bit calmer than the news suggests. And thankfully, like the few trips that we have to make out for groceries, people have been kind and polite about things. So it's good. We're happy about that. The neighbors brought over stuff, checking out to see if everybody had the supplies they needed. So that's one of the good things that sometimes when these things hit, that people can come together that might not have come together before. So all right.
Good stuff. How about you, Ben? How is it in up north?
It's not too bad up north. I went out for the first time today in ages. I couldn't believe it. It was like one of these zombie movies. It was just nobody anywhere. Just because I've been working from home and trying to not go out at all, unless I have to, which is what you're supposed to. But I've stuck to it because it suits my lifestyle, really. It was quite a shock, but yeah, I'm doing all right.
Good, glad to hear it. So, everyone in the chat room, hello, welcome. I hope everything is coming through. We're being told that we have excellent audio, so that's a good thing. Cryss, I just want to check with you because you mentioned earlier on that my microphone last week was a little bit quiet. Does everything seem well balanced today? I can give it some more.
Well, over our speakers it was okay.
Yeah,
it sounds great.
Okay,
but over chat, over the live stream, it was a little bit. So maybe once the everybody in the chat room catches up to this, let us know if Robbie is balanced with the rest of us.
Cool. Yeah, I think looking at the levels here, we should be okay. So, yeah, give me a one. Yeah, yes, that looks good. Right. Okay, let's do a show. We've got a number of things to cover today. I think I was just watching Jamie's show. I know he covered one of these things, so we're trying maybe not to linger. Although I didn't think Jamie lingered too long on that, so it kind of gives us a bit of scope for discussion. But first of all, sort of following on from what we were just discussing about the situation, which is unavoidable. One of our members on the ProSynth Network, who is probably one of the biggest pros that we have on the ProSynth Network, is Mr. Michael Whalen, who has a long and esteemed history as a keyboard player, synthesis musician, label manager, and all sorts of other titles. And unfortunately, he was struck down with the dreaded COVID-19 and diagnosed this week. But he's good. He's okay. And I just wanted to play you a little noodle that he's done over on his Facebook page. And let's just switch over to our topic screen, and hopefully you guys will be able to hear the audio of this. So this is Michael going for it on his new Korg ARP ARP 2600, and having a whale of a time, or a Whalen of a time. Did you see what I did there? And he's really going for it with his lightning fast fingers. So it's really good to see that despite being struck down with a mild version of the illness, and that's his words, not mine, that he's still rocking that 2600. So yeah, good to see that, and nice to see 2600 in here.
Good lad.
Have you? Has anyone heard the 2600 in various videos that have been going on?
I haven't heard too much. So Michael's video, and there was also, let me look for it here. On ProSynth Network, there was another one.
Yeah, there's been 2 or 3. I forget his name now. Yeah.
Gigantic Perkins. Yeah, that was great because he was using the some of the Make Noise modules along with it too.
And I think Mark Doty's done a couple on his Automatic Gainsay channel because he got his and famously started a mini internet storm because his was delivered with a nasty hole in the flight case, which was horrible, but still fully functional, and he's in love with it. So nice to see the 2600s getting out there, and nice to see Michael. And I don't think Michael's watching, and certainly if he is, then all the very best to you, sir, and hope you're feeling better day by day. And for anybody else that's in the room, in the group, that is suffering either directly or indirectly as a consequence, we send all of our best thoughts and wishes to you. Luckily, touch wood, there's nobody in my immediate circle of friends or family that have been affected in terms of the illness, so I count my blessings there. So good to hear. But talking again more of this kind of COVID-19 lock-in stuff, there was another video that Cryss highlighted to me, and again from another member of ours, Tim Shoebridge, who has done some great reviews and great videos. And let's just bring Tim's video up here, and we'll have a little watch of this. Here we go to that. This is Tim's COVID-19 countdown. Nice blend of graphics there.
Welcome to the News Hour. The death toll from the outbreak of coronavirus in Italy has surged.
So that's an interesting kind of mixture there. Cryss, what were your thoughts on that?
Highest daily increase recorded anywhere.
Yeah, it's nice to be remembering everybody during this time, and of course Tim does great work, and I think he's using the OB6 and the Prophet 6, right, as I recall.
Just reading the description here, it says this is the first track of an album that started out as an homage to the Prophet 6 and OB6, but quickly evolved into a concept album inspired by the life-changing situation we unfortunately all find ourselves in. So yeah, an interesting take on it. At least some creativity is being spawned from this.
Yeah, it's whetting the appetite for me. I mean, I've got the OB6 already, but in a couple of weeks, one of my good buddies is lending me his Prophet 6 for a couple of months, so I'll do a sound set on that. So I'm looking forward to playing that, hearing it. I got to play one briefly a few months ago, and I know you've got a Prophet 6 up there, don't you, Ben?
I have, yeah. Yeah, very happy with mine.
Yeah, have you tried the OB6 as well?
No, I haven't actually used an OB6. I just had to get the Prophet.
Oh,
you know, I didn't want to play the OB6 in case it put me off the Prophet.
Well, that's what threads are made of. That's everybody's question when they go to buy one. Should I get the Prophet 6 or the OB6? Yeah. And, I don't think you can make a bad decision on that.
Well, I'm going to have to put my hand up and say that I've never played or heard either of them, so I'm ignorant of the... well, you know me, I don't do analog.
Yeah, when you first get the Prophet 6 and plug it in, it's like a trip down memory lane. It's just all those tones, you recognise them from loads and loads of different records that you've listened to, and and I can't wait to start using mine properly. I've not got round to it yet. But,
so is it close to, like, when you say it replicates all those sounds that you know kind of remember from days gone by. Is that because it sounds is doing a very good job of being a Prophet 5, or?
For me, it's good enough for me. I've never heard a A/B comparison of the two, but it sounds very Prophet 5 to me, good. And I'm happy with that.
It's and then Cryss, the OB6 is that supposed to be sounding like a classic Oberheim of any kind, or is it a completely new synth?
Yeah, it is very much classic Oberheim. It's not a reproduction of any single Oberheim, though. So it's a poly, of course, like the OBX, and it would probably be most close to the OBX, but it uses the SIM voice cards and filters. So it really is like a poly SIM. True poly sim. So yeah, it's not going to sound like an OBXA. I love it. The only thing that I really wish it had is I wish it had a switchable to 24 decibel filter. Of course, the 12 is a classic for the Oberheim sound, but I miss some of the versatility that the Prophet 6 has by having the 24 decibel filter.
Sure. Just looking at the chat room there, Simon saying he had the Prophet 6 and sold it, reckons the OB6 is better. It says there's nothing like a Prophet 5 other than a Prophet 5, of course. So yeah, well, interesting. I have no opinion on this, so I can't really say.
It's each to their own, isn't it? Like everything. But I can understand why some people prefer the Oberheim sound. It's like a very niche area for the Prophet sound, isn't it? It's kind of it's kind of thin, but it works. It works for me anyway.
I'd say I've never really kind of I'm aware of the Prophet 5, and I know that it's been used by many people who I admire musically, and I think if you say Prophet 5 to me, I instantly think of Richard Barbieri in Japan. And the way they used it, and also Thompson Twins, they were big users of it, and they were massive. Both bands were massive for me, so I remember them for that. But I couldn't go beyond that. So I've never really played one, and I know that it's this legendary instrument. I must go over to see Simon and abuse his at some point.
I have played both of them, and they just do their own thing really well. I mean, the Prophet 6 is really silky sounding, and the OB6 has got that kind of fizzy top into it. And it's a matter of what tool do you want for the job. I will say the OB6 probably has a little more of its own sound, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, whereas the Prophet 6 really can cover a lot more ground, I think, than the OB6. The OB6, you're pretty much stuck with its sound, whereas that Prophet 6 can go many different places.
Cool. That's good. And Native ES says in the chat room, is there anything similar to a Rev 1 or Rev 2 Prophet 5 available at the moment?
Not that I know of. At least not Ollie.
Until, of course, the name who we shan't mention come up with a recreation. Excuse me. So I'll be devil's advocate here. The only Prophet 5 experience that I have is through plugins. Now I know that is it Yuhi did a plugin that was heavily Prophet 5 inspired, and of course there was the Native Instruments Pro 53, and of course Arturia have one in their collection. So I like what I hear when I play the Arturia one, but is that close? Am I being,
I think the Repro 5, the Yuhi is much better sounding than the Arturia one. It is really, really good sounding. I think it comes packaged with the Repro 1, which does the Pro 1 sounds. But the 5, I'm a really big fan of Yuhi soft synths. I think that's my favorites. I've got the Zebra HZ and the Pro 5 and Hive 2. and I think that's all I have. But yeah, they're a fantastically good sounding synthesizer.
Yeah, I've never really heard anything bad about them.
I've got the Behringer Pro 1 here, and I kept getting a bit fed up of, redialing the settings back into it for this one particular track I was working on. I'd get to a point where I'd recorded a bit in audio. I'd get to a point that I wasn't happy with, so I'd have to go back and put the sound back in it again because I changed it to something else since. So I decided to use the Repo 1 instead, and I dialed exactly the same settings in it, and it sounded exactly the same to me. It sounded really good. So when you've got a piece of analog gear, fair enough, it's Behringer, but it's still analog, and then a piece of software that can sound close enough in a mix, then that's pretty incredible.
Yes, yes, indeed. So, okay, well, that kind of brings us slightly nicely on to another topic that we've had, which is probably the biggest news of the week, I'd say, because there's not much news at the moment, and that is Korg have updated their legacy collection. It's now just called the Korg Collection 2, and it's on sale now at the moment at some heavily reduced prices depending on what you've currently got. So the bundle is normally $400, is down to $300, but you can upgrade for various different amounts depending on what you've already got. And I will come back to that because I have an issue in that regard that I want to get off my chest. But let's just have a quick look at the advert, why don't we, and give that a go. So I'm not sure what this LRLR business is on the screen. I couldn't figure that one out. So flick through each of those classic synths. But of course the biggest I'll stop that there. The biggest quibble for me with regards to the Legacy Collection was the GUI. So on the version just before this, on a large 27-inch screen, or if I'm using my 4K monitor here, it's tiny, and there was no way of rescaling it. And I had this issue some years ago with Arturia, and thankfully they caught up, and now Korg have done this, and now you can rescale your plugins, and there are different sides. Rather than just being able to stretch them, you can choose from like small, medium, large, extended, full as well. So that's really good to see, and they've also tidied up the GUI as well, so it's much easier to read. And it looks just looks a lot cleaner. So I'm really happy that they've done this, because I own M1 and WaveStation as the VST audio unit plugins. I also have the Poly6 and Monopoly as rack extensions, because I bought those when Reason and Korg, when Korg started doing rack extensions for Reason. I thought, because I'm a Reason user, I'll go for that, and then they probably stopped developing it, and now no longer. I think they still kind of sell it in the propeller head shop, but that's kind of it. So come to you, Ben, first. Your thoughts on the new Legacy Collection V2?
Yeah, well, I got excited when I heard the upgrade thing. I thought, oh wow, is it like yourself, Rob? I was really annoyed that they'd left the graphics so dated, looking like something from the 90s, So when I heard that you could resize the graphics, and I think somebody in our group posted a picture of the MS-20, I thought, wow, that looks fantastic compared to the one I've been using. I'm going to look into this. And I got on there. It was just a nightmare. The upgrade process was just really, really difficult. In the end, I got an upgrade code to go from my Legacy Collection to version 2. Right. Of the thing for free, But when I applied it, it said that I'd already used it, which I know for a fact I never have, because I've never been through that ordeal before in my life. So I ended up paying the 52 pence it was, you know, for the full upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
You know the 52 pence. Just in case my partner's watching this later. You know. So I paid the 52 pence for the upgrade to the complete version 2, whatever it is. So I got the Triton and the ARP Odyssey. The ARP Odyssey, because I didn't have those before. The ARP Odyssey's like, that's really good. That for a plugin, that's so good. And it must be good, because what I did was I went through each of the instruments in turn. You know, as an instruments track in Cubase. I just thought I set one up, but I think the first one in the list was the ARP. I set that up, and I just went through it until I found a preset I liked. And I did that with all the instruments in the collection, found a drum loop, and made a track. And I was like, you know, I pre-picked all the sounds beforehand, so I had no idea whether they were going to go together or what, but it seemed to work, and it was a different little task for me. It kind of inspired me in a way, you know, to try and make something work out of this bizarre collection of sounds that I just like.
No, that's good. Cryss, are you a Legacy Collection user?
No, not yet anyway. I had the was it the iPoly 6 on my wife's iPad. I had picked that up on sale, but I haven't used it much because just iPad isn't part of my music creating experience. I'd got it really cheap on sale or free. It might have been free. I don't remember. But I had bought the WaveStation plugin on sale, and I really liked it. I was always interested in the sound of that synthesizer. But yeah, I think the joke that I had made on the board was something like, it looks like the GUI was designed when they made the synthesizer. Yeah. It was terrible. So after our conversation on ProSynth Network, I went and checked everything out and was listening to demos. So I got the Korg software pass so I could update my WaveStation. So I did that, and the new GUI looks a lot better. And of course, you can resize it, so that made things a lot easier. The only bummer was I had tried their new dice feature and randomizing thing, and I found it, and I just randomly happened on a really beautiful sounding patch. I tried to save it, and for whatever reason, it didn't save it, so I was really disappointed.
Oh.
So I don't really need any virtual analogs. I've got the System 8. I've got my real analogs and UHE stuff. So I was more interested in maybe I already have the WaveStation, but the M1 and the Triton, and I went and listened to some of the M1 sounds, and there's some pretty classic, memorable sounds. Like, maybe I might be interested in that. I was a little bit disappointed with the Triton ones so far, but I haven't listened through all of them yet. So I'm still kind of on the fence. If it were maybe $100 cheaper, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to get the whole thing.
Yeah.
Still thinking about it right now.
I had the rack-mounted M1, and then the Legacy Collection came out, and I was using it quite a lot, actually, the M1 at the time. But then I started doing a comparison, and I don't know whether my hearing's as good as everybody else's or not, but I just couldn't tell any difference between the software M1 and the rack-mounted M1. So I sold it because I got it in the Legacy Collection, because if we're honest, the convenience of having that level of control on the screen when you're working in the DAW is pretty good. All right, you lose the hands-on element, but you've got that total recall thing, which it kind of suits me a bit more. But now I've got a rack-mounted Triton, and the Triton plugins come out, and I've got a feeling that I haven't done a comparison yet, but if it goes the same way, I think the Triton might have to go as well, which is a shame, because it's absolutely crammed full with expansions, which isn't in the plugin as far as I know.
The Triton plugin came with everything. I thought that was
Does it?
Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that it came with, because the M1 did and the Wave Station all came with all the factory cards. That I think they did the same with the Triton. I'd be surprised if they didn't, because Roland have now issued most of their SRX cards, haven't they, with Roland Cloud? So yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
But, see, the Triton, I remember when that was teased. That they were teasing some stuff, weren't they? And everyone was, oh, what's this? And then somebody piped up and said, that looks like a Triton. And I was like, why would you want a Triton plugin? I mean, I know that it was a big, famous workstation that was used, by pretty much everyone that was using those kind of keyboards back, 20 years ago. But it's hardly a distinctive. No, I don't remember anybody ever saying, I wish there was a software Triton.
Yeah.
But then, I guess, I mean, I know that was between the Triton and the Phantoms, or whatever the Rolands were at that time, and the Motifs, or Yamaha's workstations. There were lots. It seemed like particularly the R&B and hip hop production community were using a lot of those, plus an MPC or something. So it just gave them all the sounds they needed, plus they could then sample stuff in an MPC. But I could never quite see the point of having it. But sorry, go ahead, Cryss.
Yeah, just I think maybe to that point is, I would say that they're probably doing what Roland is doing right now, because this is already digital software. They just need to make it into the plugin. That most of the work is already done, and they're just grabbing low-hanging fruit. That's not to say that the Triton isn't useful or anything like that. But here we can put out another plugin relatively quickly without having to do all the deep component modeling that they do for everything else. So, and I'd imagine, being that the Triton has had so many users, that perhaps people will spend that money to just have that back in their studio without having the big hardware there.
No, I get that. I mean, it's horses for courses, and I was never a massive workstation aficionado. I dabbled with the Alesis Fusion, and for me that covered all my bases, but it still sits on the bottom of my rack and doesn't. It's probably my least used piece of hardware. But I actually have a personal criticism here. I want to get this off my chest. So I like value for money. I'm very big on getting bang for buck. I bought the M1 and the Wave Station as separate individual plugins. I never bought the collection. I only could ever see myself really wanting the Wave Station and the M1. So I bought those individually. And as I said before, I bought the Poly 6 and the Monopoly as rack extensions back when Propellerhead introduced that platform in with Reason. And I just thought, I've got to have those. So there we go, bought those. So I actually own 4 of what I believe are the 7. Is there 7 instruments in the collection? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7 instruments plus the effects package. So I've got 4 of them, and I thought, I wonder what my upgrade price might be for that. And there isn't one. It's not like it's a bad one. There isn't one. There's just no upgrade path for me whatsoever. It's either buy the whole package or don't buy the package. And that's honest. Really, come on. Look, you've had considerable. I mean, I can't remember what I paid for. I think I paid £50 or $50 for the Wave Station and the M1 each, and then I've probably paid about that. Maybe they're a little bit less, I think, for the Poly 6 and the Monopoly in rack extensions. So let's be conservative and say, you've had £200 from me. Give me a decent upgrade path to get the other kind of 2 or 3 synths, that 2 of which I wouldn't mind, the Odyssey and the MS-20, but the Triton I could live with that, and the effects apparently are quite good as well. But I just got really upset that the upgrade path was pretty poor.
Sometimes they're really stupid, I think. I know the Arturia one I bought the Fairlight CMI, the Roland Jupiter 8, as individual things. And then when there was an offer on, I thought, I'm going to get this because it's really cheap. Downloaded the full thing, and now I've got 2 versions of those. It's like it's got its own software. Surely it can detect that there's 2 of the same thing. I'm not even bothered about having some money knocked off, but I've got to be annoyed every time I look at my computer now at 2 of the same thing. You know what I mean?
And it would be the same with me if I bought that. I'd have then 4 redundant licenses that I don't know if I can transfer or sell to someone else, but normally you either can't or they make it difficult. So I just for the amount of money they're asking, which is, I think, even at the sale price is 300 or whatever, I can buy a decent piece of hardware for that, and I'm not asking for them to give it to me for nothing, although that would be nice, Korg. But it just, because I own more than half of the package so far, I've just expected something. I mean, I tried to figure out what the prices were, because that's the other thing you were mentioning, Ben, about the kind of convoluted way of getting hold of it, because was it last year or the year before they'd begun to shut down, was it Korg user.net, which is where all your licenses were managed. And then I remember getting an email and them saying you need to go there, get a code, go to this new site, redeem the code. That then gives you a new license in that new system, and when we shut the other one down, it'll just go away. And so I remember having to do that. And I know that I've spoken to some people in the last few days who hadn't done that, so their upgrade process, because they've just not bothered upgrading, has been doubly difficult because they've had to go and do that whole Korg ID thing. But when I looked at, because when you sign into your Korg ID, which I'm just doing now, you can then go into your account and it says check your your offers, and so you go into the thing, and where is it? Here we go, account information, your offers. Click on it, and there's just nothing there. It's just the stuff that I've bought, and that's it. And another thing, Korg's communication about this stuff, because it was only when Cryss mentioned it on the group that I thought, I'll go and see if they've updated this. And I go there and you look at it and it doesn't say anything. But I just went to my account. I kind of bypassed the whole front end of the web page. So I'm hoping that the software pass now, you just open it up and it tells you, you've got an update. Fingers crossed. But
so I keep wondering, with all that you mentioned, like this process of having to go through all these Korg hoops and they're not communicating. And I've dealt with some of the similar things with Roland. When I had 1 year of the cloud subscription, and I had started it just before they did the Play 2 for Life or whatever it was called. So there was little to no information about it. I had to email them, finally got an answer back, because I'm like, their wording was so ambiguous, I couldn't tell if I was able to be a part of that since I was a current subscriber. I had subscribed a month before for a year. And they finally like, you'll get them. But then, there was so little communication. So my year ended. On their website, there's nothing. In the forums, everybody's wondering, like, hey, is this continuing? If I stay subscribed, will I get 1 free synth, 2, to keep? Nothing on. So I let it go. And then even on Gear Sluts or KVR, nobody has any idea, and they're emailing them. There's nothing on the website. Is this still continuing? And then there's some responses from Roland like, well, if you subscribed before December 2018, okay, I did subscribe before 2018, but I let my subscription lapse because there was no information. Does that mean that I'm able to get, if I resubscribe, will I get 2 more? What is going on?
Yeah.
And so it's like, is there nobody that's like in charge of the whole operation that is seeing that is, or maybe let me phrase it like this: is there nobody that's responsible for the final picture of what this all looks like, because it's leaving the end user very confused?
Yeah, they're certainly lacking in that kind of communication department. But I guess these well, they might want to use the excuse, well, we're a hardware company, not a software company, but whatever. I think they could use that. My other thing that I've just been reminded of is that you can actually upgrade if you buy like a controller. Like I try to think of an example, but there are certain USB controllers that you can buy that come with those software packages, light versions of Ableton Live or stuff. And in some of those, I think even with the Korg controllers, you get the M1 LE, which is just like a cut down version of the M1. If you own M1 LE, so it's basically a piece of software you haven't paid for, you get an upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
You get a nice discounted upgrade. But if you've paid full price for 4 products, you don't.
Yeah, I can see why that's really great.
Yeah.
I think it was Azio had mentioned in the chat room that the Roland Cloud interface is also really dated, which I think it is, isn't it? I mean, it sounds great. To be honest, I think it probably sounds the best out of all the online things. It sounds really authentic, but it looks awful. It really does it.
And I got 2 more things to rant about that. Their preset system. I mean, what the heck is going on with that? Difficult to use. The System 8 has only 64 patches per synth on it, like in 2020.
Yeah.
And the GUI looks terrible, and we've not had any new Legendary series synthesizer added since the TB303, which was over a year ago. I think it was 13 months ago or something. They've been offering all these sample stuff, SRX, and again, it's like Triton type stuff. But where's the JX8P or the Jupiter 6 or the Jupiter 4? Or how about making the ProMars, which would be cooler than in my opinion, would be greater than the Jupiter 4 if you just made it a poly. You can do easy.
A great poly.
I like. I mean, I've only been a Roland Cloud proper subscriber now since like last month, and the preset system's pretty naff. The GUIs, when you blow them up into the larger versions for people with bad eyesight, they go a little bit fuzzy, so they're not properly scaled. But they're still usable. You can still see everything. I don't necessarily need it to be 100% pretty, just usable. Yeah, the patch system is pretty rubbish. But that's an interesting point you make about the fact that all they've been doing is adding sample libraries or conversions of the SRX banks. Because I think the last one was SRX Brass, and there's another one, wasn't there? There was a couple they just recently put in. But actually, funny enough, I had a cause to log a support ticket with them yesterday because it kept telling me that SRX Brass needed updating. So I clicked on it and clicked update, and then all of a sudden I had 2 instances of SRX Brass in my cloud manager, and it kept telling me that one of them was in need of an update. So I clicked on the update, and it just told me it needed an update to the same version. So I emailed them yesterday or Saturday, and I thought, well, I probably won't hear anything until Monday or Tuesday. 2 hours later, some guy comes back and says, thanks for your ticket, uninstall the cloud manager, reinstall it, and it will go away. And it did. So fair enough. So they're pretty quick.
Yeah, a lot of problems with the cloud manager while I was subscribed. All the time it was saying, you need to update the cloud manager itself. The button to do it, it'd go to download and install, and then it would say it again.
That's kind of the thing. I was in this infinite loop of updating one of the plugins. But I remember when I first trialed it, when it first came out, I put it on, and all of a sudden my Mac started to really misbehave, particularly when shutting down. It would just do lots of funny things. And funnily enough, in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed that my Mac hangs when I shut down for the night. It hangs at that, so everything goes off the screen, but the dock remains at the bottom, and then I've just got my cursor in the middle. and it just stays there for about, I don't know, 5 minutes, and then it's almost like the Mac reboots itself, and when I shut down from there and start up again the next morning, the Mac tells me that it had a critical failure shutdown, and do you want to reopen the windows you had last time? And I was like, well, no, it was fine. But it's slightly odd. So I've now set the Cloud Manager not to be running in the background, and I'll manage that, like I do with, Arturia don't need to have it running in the background, and UVI don't have theirs running in the background, and Native Instruments don't have theirs running in the background. So why the hell should Roland get that privilege as well? But no, nice to see Korg finally, bringing the GUI up to date, which I think is... I'm surprised they didn't go for maybe a cloud subscription service themselves.
Yeah, I think that might be in the pipeline, because I think Roland Cloud's been pretty successful. I'm really appalled with the marketing, like you said, because I mean, we probably listen out for these things more than most people, and we didn't know about it.
No.
It's like, who knows about this?
Yeah, I think it's just word of mouth now has got it out and about there. But there's been, I mean, social media. I've not seen anything really on there.
It's not even been on Instagram, which Instagram gets everything.
Very strange. But there you go. And I'm sure if they, plugged it a bit more, they'd sell a bit more and maybe able to drop the price of their damned upgrades. But never mind. But no, it's interesting and nice to see that they finally. And before we move on to something else, Cryss, you mentioned that there's been no legendary instruments added to the Roland Cloud. What would you like to see in Korg's? If Korg were to do what Roland did, what would you like to see Korg add to their arsenal?
So let me think about that. But I know I would have said the Trident, but the new Tricent plugin is actually great. So it's I'm getting along with that very fine. Let's see, they don't have the 2600 in there, do they?
No.
I mean, I think that would be the first obvious choice. I'm not as in tune to Korg's legacy as I would be for Roland or Yamaha. I do have a King Korg, which had a great virtual analog engine, which that's something that they could put in there. The hardware, I know Jamie has talked about this, but I've had the same experience. The software engine in it is fantastic. The hardware, I don't know what the hell they were thinking about on that. But that would be a perfect candidate. They've already developed it. Just make it a software plugin, and as a bonus, allow me to transfer patches back and forth. Because I'm not going to be programming on that hardware anyway. It's it's a complete cluster. I have to use the Sound Tower stuff to do anything on it, and then Sound Tower is horribly buggy and outdated interface anyway. Sorry. The question: 2600 Trident. What would you guys think?
Well, I'm going to be really boring and say exactly the same thing as Cryss. I'd love to see the Trident on there, like the Mark II Trident on there. That'd be fantastic. And what about giving us a Kronos, making it a cloud-based thing, and giving it a computer must be able to do what a Kronos can do, exactly the same. So give us that.
Yeah, interesting.
Might be worth a $4.99 a month then.
I would like. There's two that spring to mind immediately. The first one is the first ever synthesizer that I touched and played with, which was the 700S. So I'd love to have a 700S. Although the next machine that I'm going to say that I'd like to see on there can do a really good 700S impression, and that's the Prophecy and or Z1. So I wouldn't mind seeing those in software. It wouldn't make me sell my Prophecy because I love it, but there's and then of course you've got things like the 3100 and the 3300, which are kind of legendary and rare. And I know there's Full Bucket Music, this guy that releases software plugins
Triton.
Yeah.
About.
So, he's done some really good recreations. So, it's doable. That would be nice. And they could throw in a few of their drum machines as well, like the mini pops, and that would be nice to have some stuff.
Yeah. What about this?
What's that? Let me switch to your camera. Oh yeah, of course, the micro preset for all the OMD fans.
We could have one of these.
I mean, that's dead. Yeah. I mean, that can't be difficult to do either. That's a classic. That one.
Yeah, it sounds great as well. I love this. A bit dusty at the minute, like, it's a cracking little thing.
OMD all the way.
Bought to do one.
I wonder what that was.
I never sold it on.
Was it about an aeroplane with a bomb?
It worked quite well.
I bet it does. But yeah, I mean, they say the Trident
says
the Poly 800 maybe. I'm just looking through a list here.
Native VS says the Korg DW8000, and I would all for that one as well.
Yeah, I'd much rather that than the Poly 800, to be honest. The Poly 800. I've got one, and I never use it.
Yeah, but, I mean, if you look through their history, you think that actually there's nothing. There are a few standout moments, but they don't have the back catalogue of, say, Yamaha or Roland.
Somebody mentioned in the chat before that Yamaha, I mean, apart from their involvement with Steinberg, they've not really gone into this area at all, have they? You imagine the back catalogue that they could release. It would. Glorious. Amazing.
Yamaha did what's that website where you put forth idea scale,
right?
And after Behringer put out their mock-ups of their CS80 clone, Yamaha spins up this idea scale. What if we did this? We did, but I don't it's ever going to happen, or it's too little too late, or they do something that only rich people can afford. I don't hold my hopes out too high for that.
No, it's I don't know. I mean, Yamaha, you've got a huge back catalogue there of some real classics. I mean, the UVI, is it UVI, have got a library, I forget what it's called now, but it has a CS70M sampled in there, and I know it's all samples, but I do I kind of prefer it to like your CS80, because it does CS80 stuff, but it does other different things, and I kind of like that, so I don't mind seeing those. But there has to be a time, doesn't there, when they all have to kind of buckle to pressure and release something. Although, it's in a way, it's sort of admirable that Yamaha have said, no, we're just going to keep on doing what we do, and
Yeah. It'd also be nice to have access to all that back catalogue of synths as well, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
I'd imagine the DX stuff would be pretty, especially for Yamaha to have all the original code and everything, to be able to nail that. I mean, Dext does a pretty good job, but this would be exactly the same.
One thing that I was thinking about this because of recent events in my life, but there's not been a plug-in recreation of the Mark II DX7, and that's distinctly different from the Mark I, because it can do lots of very exciting things. There's also no real decent 4-operator DX emulation, so it's. Some people say, you can just import a patch into a 6-op thing and just turn 2 of the operators off, but that's not.
I was going to say,
no, it's not the same, because they're all based on algorithms, and the algorithms are preset into the machine. So a 4-operator machine has 8 algorithms, a 6-operator machine has 32, and then the 8 operators, I think the FS1R had something like 88 operators, but they're all 88 algorithms. So they're all pre-constructed, and you pick the one you want, and you can turn elements on and off. And there's a really good video. There's a guy on YouTube called Mad Fame. I've probably mentioned him before, and he did this brilliant recreation of the DX27 or DX100 solid bass patch, which is just like on every house record, the late 80s, early 90s, and that's done on, let's say, a DX100, I think, originally. But he managed to recreate that on a DX7 using one of the closest algorithm he could get to the one that was used, and then just enter in some things, and he got very, very close. It was pretty identical. But with the DX7 II, you've got layering, and you've got micro-tuning and fractional scaling and all these other things. And there's no plugin out there that does that, but there's no decent 4-op plugin, which I'm just kind of puzzled that, Arturia have done a DX7, there's the DexEd, or there's that, there's FM8, previously FM7 from Native Instruments, but nobody's done a proper 4-op. And the TX81Z or DX11 is highly regarded as an FM synthesizer, because the each operator has 8 waveforms, not just the sine wave. It has all these different other waveforms, so it gives it that real character. And nobody's done that in software, which I find odd. But there you go.
I think Yamaha should do it.
They should. But we'll have to wait and see. I guess it's all up in the air at the moment. Anyway,
they've kind of done something similar to Roland in that it seems like with these companies we get almost what we want.
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Most. For instance, the System 8, very limited patch storage and no aftertouch. The Yamaha that interested me, because I'm not a workstation type of person. I would just shoot myself in the head if I had to work on a workstation. I'd rather do it in a DAW. But some of the sound stuff is what I would be interested in. So when they came out with their what's the new series, Moog X, in the Yamaha. So this looks like it would do all the FM stuff, and just kind of be a little bit of everything in one. And then again, no aftertouch, so you lose that dimension of it.
Who came up with that? What was going on at the product development meeting that says, we're going to take this really good engine, we're going to take it out of the montage, and we're going to put it into this thing, and we're going to really focus on the FM, but we're going to take away flipping aftertouch, which is FM synthesis loves aftertouch. It's crazy. Yeah. Who the hell thought that? And I've not played one, but I'm told that the whole keyboard mechanism itself is really not very nice. It's kind of spongy and say it has no aftertouch, which really goes against the grain of Yamaha's history with quality keyboard mechanisms.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Somebody did say to me the other day, the reason they did that was to boost sales of the montage. You go to the Moog X, you think, oh, that's really good, but it doesn't have that, and it doesn't have this. But the montage has it.
Does it work over MIDI?
Apparently it does it over MIDI. Yeah. Why build a key? Just build a module then. If that's...
Yeah, why haven't they done that? I would love a Moog X or a montage module. I haven't got room for another keyboard.
And it has 8 operators, which is what the FS1R had. And the FS1R is a highly sought after, coveted module because it's got 8 operators and formant shaping, which Dr. John Chowning, who discovered FM synthesis, said was the natural progression for FM synthesis to go into, the formant shaping. He said it's just perfectly suited for it. And yet they don't bring the formant shaping into the Moog X. It's not like they haven't done it before. So what gives? But yeah, it's really.
So have you guys seen Behringer just did some teases, circuit board drawings, new monster synth, and some people are saying that it could be perhaps like a PPG. What can you tell us about that, Robbie? That's not in my sphere of knowledge. That's in the digital age where I don't.
I don't know what those PCBs were for. I think Behringer said in the post, the first person to guess what this is will get one as soon as it comes off the production line. So of course everybody piles in.
Wow.
And the only thing that I could think of that it looked like was a memory Moog. because it had those 2 square buttons above the pitch and mod wheels. So I'm thinking, memory Moog, that's a new one, because they've not really talked about doing... And then I saw some suggestions that it might have been a PPG, but I couldn't see... I mean, it's difficult to see anyway. It was a PCB layout, and it could be anything. But do we need a hardware PPG? Do we need, I mean, wavetable stuff is being done perfectly well by other manufacturers. Is there a gap in the market for it? I don't think so, but it'd be interesting. I would rather see somebody do, if they're going to do the PPG, do it with the full-on wave term and everything else, so bring in the samples and have all of that functionality.
Is it the Argon 8 wavetable? It is, isn't it? I've got my microwave. I'm quite happy with that. Chris, what you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tougher area to mine for hardware because I mean the Argon is doing its thing. I think that's an interesting little synth and it sounds good. But when you have soft synths like Hive 2 and Pigments 2, I'm not really feeling the need for that there. So
I think for me, this will lead us on to a topic conversation later on, really. But do we really? I mean, I've just bought the Hydra synth, but do we really need? Sorry, Robbie. Hardware digital synths, because can't a computer do it just as well? Aren't we better off with analog?
No.
Hardware and digital software, if you know what I mean. Sorry.
Well, should we leave that conversation till later? Yeah. But yeah, no, I take your point. Do we need any of this stuff? I mean, we can do it all in software. Let's be honest. If we wanted to, we could do everything we wanted in software. Behringer have done the MS 101. Well, Roland have got software 101, and then there's the Lush 101, and there's so many that do it really, really well. What else have they done? Odyssey. All right, GeForce Oddity. Blows it. It's a brilliant, absolutely brilliant piece of software. What else have they done? Can't think now. No, Behringer in terms of hardware. But if you look at all their bits of hardware, there's probably a software equivalent out there for it if you want it. And if there isn't, it wouldn't be difficult to develop. So, we could say, well, you could do anything in software now, and as computers exponentially get even more powerful and able to handle this stuff, it's the PPG. Waldorf have already got a plugin. I mean, that's a god-awful mess to look at. It's horrible interface, but nevertheless, it really does it very, very well. I've heard a PPG up close, and it's it's chest-shaking stuff. And the plugin really does sound very, very much like it. Although there will be some people that would disagree, but I think it. Apart from the DA converters, it's pretty damn close. Fairlight. I mean, who would want a software Fairlight? I could never really understand why. The Fairlight was just a sampler that did things in a particular way, but it was the technology, the limitations that gave it the character, if you will, and you can get close to that character. Certainly in a mix, you'd never really notice, and you can do all of that in software. So why revert back to an archaic method of doing something, because it really was. When I first experienced a Fairlight, I had to kind of literally forget how to use a sequencer, because Page R and Page RS in the Series 3s are I can't drag and drop. I can't it's horrible. So I don't know. We'll have this discussion later on about we'll leave that one. Talking of Fairlights, I just want to bring this one because this guy is, in my mind, he's an absolute flipping genius. So this is Andrei. I'm not going to attempt to say his surname. He's Russian. He works for Intel out in the States. He's pretty, I don't know, high up or very deep in the technical world at Intel. So he is of that way inclined, and I know him from his work with Fairlights and repairing and restoring them. And rather than kind of doing what I do with Peter and just restore these things back to their original condition, Andrei takes it to the next level. And this video, this first one, this is an introduction to his setup.
And welcome to my studio.
And
I'm going to give you
it's a little bit shaky, Cam, but he's such a cool guy and such a nice guy, and what he's done is amazing. I'm just going to skip through because this is it's a 20-minute long video. So as you can see, he's got a Series 3, and you can see that he's running an MFX controller keyboard on top, which is just some added features for the hard disk recording that you could add into the CMI. And he's running a mouse as well, which is always interesting. Because the original Series 3s had a graphics tablet, almost like a trackpad, that had a pen attached to them. But over in the back there, you see this black shiny box behind him, and that is his main studio Fairlight. So I'm just going to go over to the bit where he opens it up. So he drops the panel down, and inside there is pretty much an entire Series 3 Fairlight minus one voice card, and there's a reason for that. But yeah, that's essentially what the front card cage of the Series 3 looks like. And then on the back, I'll just pause it. Where is it?
SCSI2SD, and SCSI2SD comes from this board. This board module for the 8.
Okay, so this is the rear side. So this is what you get on the back of a Series 3. But because of the limited space of a 19-inch rack, he couldn't get all the voice cards in. So that's why it's only running 14 voices, not the full 16. But he's still got the digital sampling card in there. He's got the main power board with the printers and keyboard attachments. He's got the SMPTE synchronization card and the VGA card over here as well. And then the MIDI ins and outs. And so that's his setup, and then he goes on to talk about how he has that connected up into his studio. And you'll notice that he doesn't mention it at all, but that's all sitting on top of a synclavier, and a big nice synclavier too. And then he boots the system up, and he's talking about how he routes all the audio into his Pro Tools system. And then there's this bit in the video where we get to, and I remember the timestamp distinctly. So he's now talking about how he transmits the screen from the Fairlight into his main studio area, because all we've seen at this moment is this little corner, and then we pan around, and you need to make sure you've got something soft under your jaw, because pans around. Oh, look at that ceiling! Look at that! It's just amazing. And he's got his big monitor up on the wall there, and the Fairlight's being fed as a window on that computer there. So it's just, it's an incredible setup, and I was trying to identify everything in there. He's got stuff behind stuff. That's how wonderful it is. And apparently he got the ceiling materials like really cheap.
So from there we will.
And he's also got the little Joe Britt box, which is this little box to the right-hand side there, which translates USB into the serial connections that the Fairlight prefers. Then he takes us to his back room. Oh, look, I've just got a couple of M1s and a few other keyboards. What the hell is that? I have no idea. It's big. It looks like a Kurzweil. That's a Kurzweil, isn't it, I think? Huge thing. And there's a Fairlight just sat on the rack at the back, and then he's got this thing, and this is this tower that he's... Oh, there's a drumulator just shoved in the corner there, and this is the MFX. So the MFX was a tower that was made after the kind of the classic Fairlight period, and this is a miniature Fairlight in an MFX tower that is connected to a little one of these little tiny little Windows PCs that handles all the display and the communication between a regular keyboard and stuff. And he's just squeezed this whole thing into a little tower unit, and then on the back It's got all the main connections from the MFX, so you've got it's a 2-channel system, so you just get 2 voices, and you've got your MIDI and your synchronization and your graphics. And that little black box to the left is this tiny little Windows PC that handles the communication. And then he has it basically running on this system here, and this is just a full Series 3 system. There you go. It's just operating there. It's just, I mean, the guy has done some amazing work. Oh yeah, and there's the hard drive, which is a micro SD card on a SCSI to SD thing that he's just put in a little caddy. It's just amazing. And he's done a second video as well that he released today, which talks into more detail about how you connect up USB keyboards and mice to an old Fairlight, which obviously predated that kind of stuff. But I was just watching that and just absolutely blown away by this guy's ingenuity and the way he's just sculpted these old machines into his modern day studio. It's brilliant. Sorry, I had to do that because that stuff blows me away.
I think the
sorry, Chris.
Point of having just seen Firechild on Jensen's show, to see all his analog collection and then to see this guy's digital collection. I think we're done for the week.
Exactly. I want to go and visit Andrei when I get over there. I mean, I've seen he's done some videos before. He's not very, he's kind of camera shy. He's one of these guys that, just does what he does and doesn't really talk about it a lot, unlike people like me. And he's done this video, and I've never been in that studio before. And then it's just that moment when he just pans round. It's all very just kind of nonchalantly, and it's boom. It's just like, wow.
Yeah.
But no big deal. I mean, I don't know what he does musically. I know that his day job is at Intel. I also know that he worked closely with BT, as in the musician BT, not the telecommunications company that we have here in the UK called BT. And because BT bought his Fairlight from Peter in Australia, and there was some issues with that, but it got sorted. And then Andrei has gone along there and developed a way that he's kind of replicated what he's done here, so that BT can now integrate the Fairlight into his Pro Tools rig or whatever it is, and that little SCSI to SD drive, the latest version of that, the version 6, allows you not only to use it as a hard drive for the Fairlight, but also you can USB connect it to a PC or a Mac and send files to the Fairlight's hard drive whilst the Fairlight's running, so you can import and export. And then he's used I think it's Chicken Systems translator to do the the kind of conversion. So you can create a sample anywhere and then just dump it into the Fairlight whilst it's running. So you kind of got like network drive access. It's
that's fantastic. Would that work on the S6000? Because I've got a SCSI to SD card reader in that. If I upgraded it to the 6, could I do
think
that?
So, because the S6000 and the S5000 used FAT format for their drives. I think it was either FAT or FAT32, one of them. But yeah, so it should do, because getting a USB card for an S6000 now is like they're rare as rocking horse poop. Yeah, love them. And I managed to. I didn't realise at the time when I bought that, I just maxed it out, put everything in. The only thing I didn't put in was the ADAT, which I didn't need. And then 6 months later, I bought an ADAT mixer. But if you've got the USB, then your computer sees the S6000 as a drive, and it just mounts it and it sits on your computer.
That's brilliant.
But with the SCSI to SD version 6, I don't see there should be no reason, because you just USB connect it, and it should then see that drive as a mountable drive. So yeah, don't quote me on it, but looks like it. But yeah, that was this week's gear porn for me. Bless you, Andrei. Love you. Hate you though.
I watched it I watched it. I didn't really understand much of it. I've got to be honest. At one point, I thought he was talking about he'd made a new Fairlight on one board.
Right.
That's kind of what I was getting from it. I don't know where that came from, and I don't also understand what use a 2-voice Fairlight is. Obviously,
well, it's 2 channels, so you're only going to get
left and right.
But I mean, I know the guy that I do this stuff with, Peter in Australia, Peter Wilk. He's doing something similar. He's trying to develop a mini Fairlight, but no, it's not a Fairlight on a single board. But what he's done. That tower unit was made by the Fairlight company after they went bankrupt. So once they'd gone bust and got bought out, they became this kind of pro post-production audio hardware company, and they made these little MFX tower units that effectively were a forerunner of a regular kind of PC, but running the custom stuff. And so he just took that form factor and said, I wonder if I can squeeze this all in and just have a couple of channels, and then I can get audio in and mess around with it. And I think he just does it because he can, because he's clever. I mean, the other bit, that if you watch the video underneath the Series 3 keyboard there, he's got these video scalers that then send the video around his place, because the VGA output, which was a kind of a late addition to the Fairlight, is a non-standard output. So if you run it on a regular monitor, it will chop off like a centimetre at the top and a centimetre at the bottom. And that monitor he's got there is the same as that one there that you see. His is a white one, mine's a black one. These are NEC multi-syncs, and they're able to handle a wide range of frequencies, so it just works. But that scaler that he's got there means you can just connect any monitor. So anything from like a Thunderbolt 4K, something like that, to just a small thing. But I need to do something myself. We've got now we've got a little 6-inch LED screen that we've built into the drive bay of the mainframe. So on the right hand side of the Fairlight mainframe is where your drive bays are.
Oh wow!
Well, we take all those drives out, so it's just this big cavity. So what we tend to do is just put a big black plate on the front, and we bolt the SD card drive on the back of that, and that's it. So then Peter got to thinking, well, what if we haven't got space for a monitor? We could actually put one of these small monitors. So we put this small monitor on the front of the mainframe, and we just connect that up through a little bit of jiggery pokery, and we get a VGA signal out of the Fairlight, and it puts it onto this this monitor. So you don't even have to have a proper monitor. So if you just want to test things, it's great to just kind of rig that up, and then you can see what's going on there.
I'd love to see that on an emulator too. In that side bit there, where the drives
have a screen.
A screen there.
It would be great if you could have it so that it would actually interrogate the hard drive and just give you a directory list of of what's on there, because that's one thing that I hate. It's like working with these DXs. You've got all these cartridges, and you don't know what's on them until you put them into the machine and then load them. You can't just interrogate them. Even because that new DX7, there's the one it's the FD, it's the floppy drive version, and even with that, you go into the drive and you just get bank names. You don't see what's in those banks. You can't interrogate it to a patch level, and that's really annoying.
It's like the old Akai CD format. God, all them partitions and like FLK2.
Yeah.
What's this?
How many? It used to go up to partitions. Used to go up to about L, didn't they? It was A, B, C, D, E.
Oh yeah. It's like really annoying system.
But there you go. So I just thought I'd share Andrei's amazing feats there. So
was really good.
He's such a clever bloke, and he's very generous with his knowledge as well, which is nice, because you get lots of people that do these things and they just don't want to share it, but he will happily share. It's nice to see that that's consistent across the whole community there. Right. Should we do this gonna sneak this one in. Oh no! I tell you what, we've got two things here, and then we'll have our little topic discussion because we had this discussion lined up. So first of all, again, Cryss, I'll let you talk about this one. This is Bob Familiar, and
Oh yeah.
Bob's only got 8 subscribers, and I don't really know why, because he does some really cool stuff. And I've just kind of recently become friends with him on Facebook, and become familiar with Bob Familiar. Is that his real name, or is that like a stage name? I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah,
I don't know.
He's done.
I don't know.
It is his real name. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, I'm going to try and chat with him a bit more now. So let's bring this up. So this is Bob Familiar's Make Noise shared system and a Moog 1. So let's just run this in the background. Cryss, you can maybe tell us a bit more about this. What turned you on to this?
Oh yeah, well, I've known Bob for a couple of years now, just over the internet. We were early Moog 1 adopters, so kind of got to know him through that. And look, I kept seeing stuff posted either by him or other people of him. He's done some work for Make Noise and does live demonstrations with the Make Noise shared system and everything else he has, and does some really cool Eurorack stuff. And so I had mentioned to him the other day, I was like, hey, why don't you post some more of that stuff? Because I'm one of the 8 subscribers on this channel. Like, hey, where's all this stuff? I have to go searching other places for it. And so he got around to making this video of the Moog 1 and the Make Noise, which also, both companies in Asheville, North Carolina. And so I was really pleased that he's doing that, because he is a very, very talented guy. If you're watching, go his YouTube channel's Bob Familiar, and I think you can see the information on the screen there. But yeah, Jeff, let's go ahead and play it.
Just bump the volume up a little bit. One thing that always perturbs me about this, but is the fact that all this stuff is plugged in and connected, and I appreciate the skill and knowledge that is required to patch something like this, but it's making all of this kind of music on its own. And I know it's had some human interaction, but I don't want to say that I'm not impressed by this, but I'd be more impressed by somebody just playing it all with, a bit like Michael Whalen or something like that. But that's just I don't know. I'm really not into this kind of thing.
Modular's very, I don't know, it's a very kind of personal choice, isn't it? Yeah. I think a lot of people love it, a lot of people don't like it at all. I've just been introduced to a modular startup system myself. I've not bought anything yet, but I've got the rack to put it all in. And that was courtesy of Matt Culpin of our group.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very kindly posted it to me for free.
Very nice.
And I'm very grateful for that. I think that Bob, I'm not familiar with his modular stuff, but he sent me a link a while ago, and I didn't know him at all. And I was thinking, oh yeah, here we go. I'll give it a listen. I don't mean to be dismissive, but like everybody's making something, aren't they? But it really was up there. You know what I mean? It was so inventive and creative that I'm surprised he's only got eight subscribers. Yeah. I thought he'd have like 80,000 or something. His music is amazing. It really is. Well, and it's such a mishmash of styles that if you saw it on paper, you'd go like, whoa, this is going to be awful, this. And it really works. It's really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
No, yeah, I mean, I am not in any way into modular Euro rack. I haven't fallen down that rabbit hole. I can see why people do. I've not been tempted. It really hasn't, nibbled at my toes at all. But I do appreciate someone who knows what they're doing with it, making good music with it. I think what really has put me off is like going to trade shows, and you walk up and down the corridors, and all you hear is everyone else trying to outshine everyone else with random bleeps and bloops, and look, I can make this scream like a whatever, and this has a really low end, and listen to what this is doing, and it's just a mishmash, and I just go, no, just play some music, play a tune, a discernible tune. So when I hear something like this, I think I love it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same way, and I've got my little modular system going, and I don't love it the same way I love polysynths. But to me, there's been the challenge of it. Like, can I make music of this? In fact, I just, I've only done probably 4 or 5, full patches on it. But the challenge has been for me to make music with it. I like ambient music that's with Eurorack stuff. So like this track from Bob was right up my alley. In fact, the last track that I just put out on YouTube was using my Eurorack, but I introed it with a Moog 1 and then some of my other polysynths. So it's kind of just mixing everything together in a drum machine, but trying to make something that's music and not just. I'm not really into. I'm not dismissive of EDM or techno or anything like that, but it's not the area that I sit in. And so to me, if I see somebody make some really beautiful music with a modular, the texture part of it, I think that's what you really got to be into, because you can make melodies on it just fine, but you want to be able to create something that's textural. And a lot of times, when I'm scrolling Facebook and I'm part of these synth Facebook groups, there's so many people putting out very mediocre music. And like I said, when you see somebody like Bob, and there's some other really great modular synthesists that are making music, or music that I would enjoy. And when you come across that, it can be quite fantastic and really beautiful. And it fits a type of listening that I listen to a lot of rock music. I can, got Van Halen in the car right now. But
the actual band?
What's that?
You actually have the band in the car.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Saturday Night Live. Aerosmith is in my breakfast nook. Like Wayne's World.
Sorry.
Yeah, I wish I had Van Halen in my car right now.
Indeed.
One thing I love about analog stuff, and I presume Robbie isn't into this because it's my whole interest in analog stuff. I've got the Moog Sub 37 there, and when I first plugged that in, it was like, whoa! It's like I'm controlling the electricity, it's like, listen to that. There's more electricity there, and there's less there, and it I don't know. It's just that fizz and buzz in a good way, not like the wrong way. A modular, even though I've never dabbled in it myself, it seems to be the epitome of that. It's like you get these really like crazy mad scientist, massive oscillating sounds. I think for me, I couldn't be bothered with all that patching at all. I'm not a patching person, but I'd be sampling away, and I'd have this massive collection of polysynths that were modular, oscillated. I think.
Yeah, I understand the attraction, and I think you have to be of a certain mindset. Your head has to be wired in a particular way to really appreciate what you need to do to get these things to make the sounds that they make. And I don't think my head is wired that way. I openly admit that I was once called lazy by a headmaster of my school back in 1970 something. He says, "Puricelli, you are lazy," and it always stuck in my head that I'm lazy. That's my excuse. I'm lazy. And I think actually, as I've gotten older, I've realised that no, I'm not lazy. I just look for a more efficient way of doing things. So I won't do stuff unless I can actually find an efficient way of doing it. And that's, for me, that's inefficient because you're having to put everything in. Now, I know that those people that are really into it will say, well, no, look, it gets you back to the real basics and you understand how you can route a signal from here to there and what it does and how it does it. I'm not entirely sure I really care whether, how that works. If I can, I mean, programming synthesizers, whether it's modular or whether it's, digital or whatever, takes a knowledge of signal flows and how it goes from the oscillator to the mixer through to the filters and blah blah blah, and modular breaks it down even more. And I think many of the people that I've met that are really into modular are a certain kind of people that I would have associated with that way of doing things. So I think your head has to be wired in a particular way to really get it. I got VCV rack. I thought, here we go, free of charge. It's on a computer screen. I've got loads of modules that I can take and play around with. And the first thing I do whenever I get anything is I turn it on and I start trying to use it without referring to a manual. I really don't read the manual until I absolutely have to. And most things, if I can get into it without reading the manual, then I know that it must, for me, it must be really good. I spent a couple of hours with VCV and I wasn't even making a sound. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm following the signal flow. I'm going from an oscillator into here, but there's no sound. And then, eventually it dawns on me what I'm doing wrong, and then I start reading the manual, and then I found some videos on YouTube as it is the trend these days, and they took me through making a basic patch, and here we go. Now I understand it a little bit more, and I spent a couple more hours, and I haven't really opened it up since. Every now and again I open it, have a look at it, update the plugins, the modules that have been updated, and then just kind of put it away. This is the other thing, is that there's supposed to be a VCV rack plugin, but I've never been able to get it to work. I've never been able to get it to plug in to. I've not kind of figured that out. Do you know how to do that, Cryss?
Bridge was discontinued or whatever they call, and VCV Rack 2, which will be out, I think, sometime this year. Okay. Paid version that has a plugin will be much easier to use within a DAW.
Right. Yeah, because then that would then make it a little bit more appealing. Because I think Cherry Audio have got something that's similar, where they've got a range of free plugins that you can stick into a plug, a range of free modules that you can stick into the plugin, which you can use in your DAW, which kind of makes a bit more sense.
And that was one of my concerns with VCV Rack. Is I want to be able to integrate it into the stuff that I already do, and that has to go into Logic. So I did a video with VCV Rack, and the patch came out pretty well. And I did played some guitar over the patch. I first played the patch on the system and did one live take playing the keyboard into I think I used the Platts oscillators, and then I left some space and just overdubbed the guitar, and it came out pretty well. I think with it, it's kind of a matter of where your interest and your taste are. And because, as I'm looking at it, say, for instance, Robbie, you really love digital sampling and the hardware that's associated with that. And a lot of the things, like if I strip the conversation that you just had about Eurorack, and you say, well, I don't like the basics of this, or I like or doing this and this and this. The same thing could be, switched around instead of what you're interested in. And we know that it's just it's wherever our tastes go. because I love guitar equipment. I love polysynths. Eurorack is something that I experiment with, and I do like it, but I don't love it the same way I do polysynths. And sampling, I don't do any sampling. So I mean, that's not really my area. And I go, well, I thinking about working with the hardware of that, like I'd be lost, and like that's a whole big another area of knowledge that I don't really want to figure out, because we only have so much to go around in here.
So you'd find Akai really easy. Don't bother with the EMU stuff; it's too hard.
Well, you see, no, I would say, well, yeah, Akai is simple, but then I think EMUs. I mean, the Emacs. I was delighted when I had never touched one before, and it's such a simple method. Yeah, I mean, it's got this tiny little 2x16 LED screen, and then everything else is menu driven. So it's kind of like. It's a bit like the DX, where you press one button and then you've got sub jobs, and then you press another button to get to the sub job, and then there's sub jobs. But everything's laid out on the front panel what you have to do, and you've got a slider. So you've got two sliders, one's for the volume and one is data entry, and you sample and you just use the slider very much like the Akai S612 back in the day, and you just slide it until you get to that point where you can hear, oh, that's where the loop point is, and then that's it, boom, and it's done. And it's, for me, it's just, it's kind of second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Intuitive.
So, and the same with Akai. I mean, my interest in synthesizers started in the analog era, but by the time I could afford to get my hands on them, we were in digital world, and that was the music I was listening to. It was heavily using sampling and FM and D50s and DX7s and all that kind of stuff. And so that's, for me, that's where my interest kind of blossomed. And so when I got an Akai sampler and sat and learnt the sample, the program, the key group, that kind of methodology, then it just kind of made sense to me how that structure works. And the only thing that I've ever found that kind of replicates that is UVI Falcon, which I think is a great software plugin. And their sampling structure works exactly the same. You take a sample, you give it, put it into a key group. You then take those key groups and you put those into a program. Then you take that program and you can load it into a multi with all these other programs, and there's your massive set of instruments. And you can go ahead and make your song, whatever. So yeah, I absolutely agree, Cryss. It's where your head is at. That argument's the same, but from different angles. So and we're all different.
Thank goodness, because then we have much more variety in the music world.
I've got a lot of duplicity in my studio, but so only while we were talking about that, then I realised how many samplers I've got. It's like I've got the Triton, I've got the Phantom in rack format, I've got the V-Synth, I've got the Akai S6000. I don't know if the EX5R, that does sampling, doesn't it? I've got like loads of samplers. I don't need them.
Well, it's true though, because over the years we've had all these different forms of synthesis methods. Whether it's analog, subtractive, additive, FM, sampling, and that. But sampling seems to be the one that has just almost quietly but just prominently just being dominant in most things. Most of your plugins or your keyboards will have some form of sampling in there, whether it's a D50 form where it just uses attack samples, or whether it's something that has full blown like a workstation that has the whole every instrument in it is multi-sampled to the nth degree. Sampling has just always kind of been there, and it's why it fascinates me as a historian and a music technologist, is the way it's all pervasive across,
But it's been so well accepted as well, because if you think of the DAW as your new house, the sampler's like the kitchen sink, isn't it? It's like, I bought this house and there's no sink in it. I bought this DAW and there's no sampler in it. You need a sampler to.
I think everybody,
to work.
And it's a great place to start, because you don't have to worry about programming the sounds. You can just say, I want a horn section. Like a horn section, boom, I'm away. And then you might think, well, actually, I want a horn section that does this. and then you can start looking at different ways of doing it, whether it's through analog synthesis or whatever. But it is a very easy way into that. So shall we talk about, we'll have our end of show discussion, because we've got this, maybe we should make this a feature. Before we do, because that kind of is a natural progression for what we're just talking about, I just want to flip this in before I forget. So in amongst all of the coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, lockdown, artists, and this is the one thing that gets me, so many governments are cutting back funding on the arts, music, visual arts, video arts, photographic arts, all this kind of thing. And in these kind of situations, what are we all falling back on? Art. And so all of these artists are coming out there and they're trying to make our lives a little less tiresome and boring whilst we're all kind of locked up indoors. So lots of bands are releasing things to view. Some of them are charging and they're raising money for good causes. That's fantastic. Some of them aren't charging. Equally good as well. Genesis. So Genesis is supposed to be going out on tour later this year, asking ridiculous prices. I wanted to go, but I couldn't afford it. However, over the course of the next 5 weeks, they're releasing 5 live performances that were previously available on VHS or DVD or whatever. And they've kicked off with 1981's Three Sides Live. And the only reason I'm mentioning this is, yes, all right, I am a huge Genesis fan, and that crosses Peter Gabriel and the Phil Collins era. The other fella, the bold guy, the greatest drummer in the world. But here is Three Sides Live. But from a synth head's perspective, this will be hugely entertaining because Tony Banks has always surrounded himself with some excellent gear, as well as, of course, Mike Rutherford using the Moog Taurus. But yeah, I mean, there's loads of overhead shots of Tony Banks with what looks like an ARP Quadra, a CP70. I know later on he was using things like emulators and synclaviers, but I just thought from this is a proper gearhead and music muso thing, and of course Phil Collins drumming is just out of this world. It's that Prophet 10, isn't it? He's got on one side, he's got a mix of the other. Yeah, I just love this. Any thoughts on Genesis in terms of of everything, or just synthesizers? And
go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Banks is just a genius. Just an incredible musician, and Peter Gabriel as well. That's my. I really like the Peter Gabriel era of Genesis, and also the early Phil Collins era.
There's a CR78 on the back of his piano. Sorry.
Yeah, and I know Frank Rogers, who's in the group, did an interview with Tony Banks, and you can see that on YouTube. But he goes through all his gear on that, and
he's had some stuff.
He is a proper synth head, isn't he? He loves it. I've always found him to look a bit too much like John Cryss.
He is kind of teacher looking, isn't he? Yeah. He does look like a high school teacher.
I think if he looked like Robert Plant or something, it'd be like, Tony Banks.
Waving his hair around. Cryss, you like Genesis? You a Genesis fan?
Not too much. I remember some of their late 80s stuff, and then in later years I went back and checked out the 70s prog stuff that they had. What was the album have Supper something?
Oh, Foxtrot with Supper Ready, yeah.
Yeah. That kind of stuff. As far as the 70s prog, I was more into King Crimson, a lot more to them. But I always had appreciation for Genesis, the talent of the group. I guess perhaps I found like some of the sound overly happy. Their chord progressions and things. I just like the darker sound of King Crimson. But yeah, the band is fantastically talented, and I can't say anything against them at all. It just doesn't happen to be really my taste.
No, it's just...
So is King Crimson your your prog rock band? Is that who you'd put at the top of the tree?
Oh, I would say at least as far as like more of a pure prog, I love King Crimson, Rush, Dream Theater, Steven Wilson.
Oh, Steven Wilson.
I would say those are probably the prog bands I'm most interested in. I'm probably forgetting some, but I know those bands I've listened to a lot.
Steven Wilson, you just absolutely love him. What's he doing? I've seen Wilson live a number of times, and he always blows me. I can't wait for the new album, which is due in June, I think. There's the singles already out. But Yes, I love Yes.
That's what I was playing.
Yeah.
I was playing Changes.
And it's even I love Yes. You know, I even like Tomato. I think Tomato's not a bad album at all, even though most people rate it as probably their worst. But Close to the Edge and Relayer and all of those albums, and then going for the one, and then of course 90125. Love that kind of.
Big Generator was actually
it was
alright.
okay.
It got slated a bit, but it was alright.
It was okay.
That was Mr. Rabin's turn to produce.
Yeah, because Trevor did 90125. Yeah, but then Trevor Rabin, you know, people were saying, oh, he's not really a true Yes person, and yet, you know, he produced some of their most popular stuff, and still goes on. You know, still does. He's a big film composer now as well, isn't he? He's. But yeah, he's Yes. What was the Oh, Cryss is.
Is that how it goes?
Oh yeah. Who else do I like?
Going back to the Genesis thing, I remember seeing I was told about an advert online or in the press or something. It said Genesis touring again, may feature appearances of a certain Mr. Peter Gabriel. Now that wasn't going to happen, no. But they were actually advertising that.
I'd love to see it. I mean, I saw did you see the documentary that they did a few years ago? They got Gabriel, Banks and Rutherford, Collins and Steve Hackett. So that classic 5-piece. Yeah, and they got them all together and talking and stuff. They didn't perform, but it was kind of like, oh, you know, you hear these stories about the big rock and roll fallouts and stuff, and Peter Gabriel's he's so chilled, and he doesn't really care, and Steve Hackett,
he doesn't know what's going on, does he? Really?
You know, he's so slow in making. He posted pictures up a few years ago of a hard drive that had got PG New LP scribbled on the label. I was like, yes, here we go.
It's worse than
me. And there's still he's running Green Gartside and Scritti Politti for a close second on how long he can leave it between albums. But no, Gabriel for me is a god, an absolute god. There's nothing that he's done that I don't like. Literally nothing. Artists you think, oh, you know, that's their Duff one. I've never heard a Duff Peter Gabriel track, whether it's with Genesis or with a solo career. But anyway,
I wasn't that keen on Kiss That Frog or whatever it was called.
That was on Us or Up.
And what was the other one? The chat show one. It was a chat show on the Larry
the Barry
show. Oh, that was it.
Yeah, he was kind of.
I wasn't keen on them, but they've grown on me over time.
That's the thing. Yeah, I think you find that you get it after a while, don't you? It's everything just falls into place. But yeah. So anyway, we've got about 15 minutes left. Sorry, Cryss.
Just before mention, just for anybody that didn't hear, I'm a huge Pink Floyd fan, and they're also putting out concerts as well. And I just saw that they had a redone version of the Pulse tour from '94 put out, and a fundraiser along with it. So if you guys are Pink Floyd fans, check that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw somebody somewhere the other day took their Pulse album. They got the Pulse CD and they have replaced the battery in it, and they've said it's never stopped blinking for since the day they bought it in 90 whatever it was. So they've got the vinyl, they've got the CD, and they're still all flashing. Amazing stuff. Right, okay, so we had this kind of last topic that we wanted to discuss, which kind of follows on from our discussion about Korg legacy and what we've just been kind of discussing as well. And the question, or the topic subject was, in recent months and years, we've seen this resurgence, particularly in the last year or so, of digital gear, whether it's Hydrasynth, modals, what modals are doing with their stuff, and Yamaha DXs, and we've seen that these things are going up in values in terms of second-hand prices. Why are we seeing this digital resurgence? Why are people going for that now instead of analog? And I've got some opinions on this, and I'm hoping that my esteemed colleagues. So let's kick off with Cryss, because it was kind of his idea. So let's throw this right back at you, mate. What do you think? There's been a digital resurgence.
I think we all get bored.
Oh, is that it?
So it's not about analog or digital. It's just that we keep wanting to go and cycle through things, and so styles come back. I remember some styles when I was in high school that had come back that were kind of late 60s, early 70s kind of thing, and just cycling through. But when we have musicians that have lived through these various eras, whether it's 60s, 70s, or 80s, 90s, there's some fondness with the gear that we grew up with and the sounds that we grew up with. I mean, when I was in high school, I listened to a lot of 60s and 70s classic rock, even though that was well before my time. But the music of my era also, really made an impact on my life, and so some of those sounds too. I was into rock, so I missed a lot of the things that you guys talk about from the 80s. I'm really more discovering it now. So if you ask me about the 80s, I would talk about Van Halen or Ozzy Osbourne or Metallica or stuff like that. But to discover things like Gary Newman or Peter Gabriel or any of these classics is a bit of a new experience for me. But for everybody else, boy, now that we've gotten a little taste of the mini Moog was reissued, and then you have the Behringer version, less expensive. We're going through all this classic gear that just seems like it's the next evolution. Like, what about those sounds a little bit after that point, though?
So here's one. I had actually had this conversation with Mark Doty about a week or so ago, and he said to me, and don't quote me on this, but this is what he said: "I'm done with analog." So that for me is like Mark Doty, the king of analog demonstration videos, the purveyor of all things analog, says he's done with it. And I said, well, why? What's going on? And he said, well, nothing that is being produced at the moment in terms of new gear is pushing the envelope, doing something different. It's all just a rehash of what we used to have. Sometimes it's done well, sometimes it's done not so well, but there's nothing new. And so it's inevitable that in that void something comes in, and the easiest thing to come in is something that already exists but we've forgotten about, or we've pushed to the back, and it comes back in again. And hence, he thinks that that things like digital synths are filling that void maybe. And I thought that was interesting, that somebody who's so devoutly analog in everything that they do just says analog is I'm done with it, which I think, well, Ben. Oh.
But I wonder how much is really new in digital synthesis.
Well,
granular's gotten more popular, but what is there that's new?
What I think, just to kind of address that point, is that when analog came back, it was a fairly slow process. So, I remember, being into music technology in the 80s, and reaching that point, you know, the DX7, then we have the D50 and the M1, and you know this digital landscape builds, and that's everything that we want to hear, and these are the sounds that we love. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, really, we get this whole acid house movement. And I'm not just saying it wasn't just acid house, but acid house was kind of the big thing that drove the kids who couldn't afford all this new technology to look for something to make electronic music with. And what was cheap at the time? All the old analog stuff. So they were going into thrift stores, Goodwill stores, charity shops, car boot sales as we have over here in the UK, and they were finding people selling old analog gear, or maybe their parents had old analog gear and it was easy to come by, and this whole analog resurgence happens, and this new awareness of, you know, the young people who really not worried about analog synthesis were like, whoa, what's this? This is new. We can't afford the new stuff, so let's try and make something with the old stuff. And then we see this kind of rise demand. But what happens is, in the 90s we had emulations, we, you know, virtual analog. We even had synthesizers like the CS1X that was all sample based, but it was trying to be an analog synth because it had knobs on it, and you know, you could mess around with the filter on this, even though it was bloody awful. You could hear it stepping and everything. It was, but you had knobs on, and it was kind of. It was only when technology got to the point where it could do something new and exciting with analog that we saw the kind of the start of this boom, and that's the point. We learned the lessons from the 70s and the early 80s, where analog synths would drift out of tune, they'd be unreliable, they'd be, you know, be really hot, and they weren't very well done. But that's the limitations of the technology then. Now we've learned, let's do analog synths better, and that's what we've been doing. We've been doing analog synths better, and it gets to a point where we can't really improve on that anymore at the moment. So now we have digital, and what we're seeing with digital is companies like Modal and Hydrasynth taking wavetables and doing it better. Loads more wavetables, loads more control over the wavetables. You know, and I think we might see, you know, FM get this resurgence. Certainly in the second-hand market, it's going up in value, but also companies are going to start going back to FM and saying, well, can we do this better? What have we learned in the last 20 years or so that we can then do digital better? I don't know. What do you think? Ben, you sat there nodding.
No, I agree with a lot of that. I think Mark Doty's wrong.
Fight!
Right. I think that there's three. I might be totally wrong here, but I think there's three kind of stages of being a synthesist, and there's the listener stage, right, where you're listening to these sounds and you think, they're the kind of sounds. How can I mess with those sounds? There's the dabbling stage, and there's the doing stage, and at the minute, if we go back, like, if we went back 10 years, the listening stage would involve listening to lots of analog stuff. So when you get on your computer and you get to the dabbling stage, you can't recreate what you're listening to. So those people, those dabblers who want to be doers, were craving the analog gear. They were like, I've got to have that. I've got to be able to. If I'm going to do, I need to do what I'm listening to, which is all the analog gear. Now, I think that what's happening is what we're listening to in those early stages of doing what we do. It is from various sources. So we've got like we've got virtual synthesis, we've got sampling, we've got wavetable, we've got granular. And so when it comes to the point where we're coming out of the dabbling stage into the doing stage, and we're thinking about spending £1,000 or £2,000 on a synth, I think the fact that it can only do one of those things that your computer could do, it is a bit of a turn off. We're parting with all that money for that generation. So that this generation now, they want that analog sound, but they want the synth to be value for money, and they want it to do a lot of things. So I think that's why they might be shifting more towards the digital side, because digital is more versatile than analog. It can't always recreate that warmth, but it can have a good go at it. Analog synth isn't going to be able to do granular or wavetable, you know. It's not, and I think that's it. But this generation now that's coming through, all right, there's a few of us oldies like myself that is buying hybrid synths and what have you, but I think they want something really versatile, and I think the digital gives that them.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a valid viewpoint. Cryss, you want to come back on that at all?
Yeah, I think what's not so much in terms of, analog's been popular, now digital will be popular, but rather a blending or a synthesis, as you will, of the two. And we've seen a lot of hybrids, but in that, what I think it was your point, Robbie, mentioning like analog had some problems, and so we fixed them with digital, but we introduced other problems because all of a sudden you didn't have hands-on control of your synth. You had to go through menus to do this stuff. And so, this next kind of step in analog and digital is to combine the best features of both of them. And so to think about two instruments in particular, the Moog 1, I mean, it's about as evolved as you can get for an analog synthesizer. There's so much computer stuff in there, not in the signal path, but in how it affects the analog signal path and what you can do with it. But then on the other side of it, to see digital products, I know a favorite of yours, and actually Wagu just mentioned it, the Op6, where we get back to, okay, there was this really fundamental digital synthesis that we liked, but the problem is that nobody liked the program on a DX7. So what if we took that idea and then put knobs and sliders on it? And I think some further evolution of this will be, okay, so we're not doing anything new. We're just combining things in new ways that make a lot more sense, and that are the benefits of each of these different styles. But one area I see it going is in how you control the sound, and that could be the major evolution, because I don't really see a lot of new types of synthesis. A waveform is a waveform. There's only so much you can do with it, but the way that you control it. And so thinking about first hardware controllers, like, Raleigh did its thing, and the Linstrument. I've got a Sensel Morph, these different kind of alternate controllers. And then I remember seeing there was a small, maybe tabletop synthesizer. I don't remember the name of it. It had a bunch of sliders. It was like kind of a charcoal color. And then it had a big screen on there, and it had a 3D visual representation of the sound, that as you moved the sliders, it gave you a graphical interface of what was happening. And I think we might see some trend towards using both the tactile way you control synthesizers changing or just becoming more broad, and then also the graphical way that we interact with them. In fact, I think VCB Rack, some of those guys have been talking also about using the VR headsets with it. So again, it's not changing the synthesis, but it's changing how you interact with it.
I think as well, going back to Mark Doty, I meant to mention this before and got distracted. Analog is done. That's such a strange statement, because it's like saying the Gibson Les Paul is done.
To be fair, I don't think he said that analog was done. He was done with it in as much as nobody's doing anything to excite him anymore. He doesn't think anybody's pushing the envelope. We've kind of reached a plateau, and
but that's okay. That plateau is okay, because that is that box, isn't it? It's like the electric guitar. The Model D is the Model D. It doesn't need improving. Just that's the Model D.
But sorry, go ahead, Cryss. No, after you. I insist.
Thank you. People have predicted I'm not responding to Mark Doty here, but there have been many people that have predicted the falls of everything. And being a guitarist and, living through the 90s and 2000s as a guitarist, you're like, oh, guitar's done. It's all pop music now. It's going to die. And now it's bigger than ever. I mean, I know it's not a huge thing in pop music, but rock and country and even in pop music, these things, they're selling. Fender, when I got a private tour of the Fender factory and custom shop and all that, because I knew an engineer there. And at the time, he said they were churning out 5,000 guitars a day. And this is for an instrument that was supposedly several decades dead.
Yeah.
So, synthesis, analog synthesis, you said, the Les Paul and the Strat, they're still going to be, man, people are still discovering them because maybe we discovered it in, maybe somebody discovered the Les Paul in the late 50s. And then they other people discovered it in the 70s and the 90s, and now they're just making good music with these great instruments.
Somebody will do something that we've never considered with a Model D. Somebody will do that. It's still possible.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they will. I mean, I'm a strong believer in cycles. So I think that a lot of what happens in any aspect of life is secular, and we go through these phases, and what happens is that every time we come back, hopefully we've learned from the previous cycle and we can improve on that, even if it's only just a little bit, and then it goes away and comes back again. And if you look at the musical instruments over, I don't know, the last 500 years, maybe further beyond, there are some instruments that really aren't popular. They're very niche, so not many people play the hurdy-gurdy anymore, but there are people that do. And when you hear it, it's I haven't heard this, for ever or for a long while. And it's interesting. And then sometimes somebody picks up on that and does something with it. But most of the time they don't. But, we've got, the piano is 200-300 years old, as we know, the pianoforte as we know it. Was that?
The piano's dead. It's got nothing for me anymore.
The piano was 18th century, wasn't it? 17 something or other that in its current form, and you hear it is still today. It's this massively popular instrument whose legacy lives on in every synthesizer we build with a keyboard in it. It never.
Possibly one of the nicest sounds you'll ever hear, exactly. As well, if you think about
which is probably why it has lasted so long. Is that it's just a wonderful thing.
It's a lovely sound,
and but yet we still improve on it. We still tweak it. We still, so there was a fad in the 90s for building pianos with a synthesizer built in to give you that little string bed underneath, that pad sound, so you could do things, other things with it. And there was, I think Moog came out with a bar that you could lay across the keyboard that you could use your piano to trigger your synthesizers. But we look at all these different things and way of doing things, and now we have digital pianos. My friend just bought a Yamaha digital piano, and I just sat in his room listening to it, and you close your eyes and you can hear the hammer, the action, which is whenever I get a piano sample library, the first thing I do is say, where is the mechanical samples? I'll come to the notes later. I want to hear the mechanics, because when I used to dabble with a grand piano at school, the thing that I always loved hearing was the action of the pedals and the hammers, as well as the actual tones. And so I always look for that in a sample library. And I was listening to this digital piano, and it's just amazing. And he could call up a Bosendorfer or a Steinway or a Yamaha or whatever. He could, all these different models that you could bring into it. It was just amazing. Does it replace a real piano? No, because they have their own presence and appeal. But we do it better, and I think with analog synthesis, we've been doing it better now for a long while, and we should be happy with that. It's fantastic. I personally think that we have kind of plateaued, but I'm not seeing anything massively new coming through.
Oh, to have all the aftertouch on every keyboard.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, there are some things that you think, why on earth have we not reached that thing? Maybe that will come in the next cycle. I don't know. But so now I am unashamedly a digital person. Those are the instruments I gravitated towards, and we're slowly seeing more and more digital synthesizers, new digital synthesizers, doing things that maybe we've seen before, but doing it better, doing it bigger, doing it more flexibly, and in the terms of FM synthesis, if we see Korg, if their Op6 does become a real thing, an FM synthesizer with real-time controls that you can mess around with the sound in an easy fashion. Somebody somewhere must have come up with a user interface that makes FM synthesis palatable to the masses.
Oh yeah, there's that guy. There's that guy online, and he's touch screen like bar thing. That's brilliant.
But
I can't remember what it's called.
You could not market that as a product.
No.
But it's the idea. So hopefully somebody sees that and thinks, how can I do that better? How can I improve on that and make it into part of the synthesizer?
Can I just jump in there? How ahead of the curve was Roland when they made the JD800? Because that's what it is. It's what we're saying now, but the JD800 did it in 1993 or 4 or whatever it is.
So this cycle will do it better by not having that red glue problem.
There you go. That's what it is. But we do. We learn from our mistakes, and when it comes to being popular again, we'll do it better and we'll do it more efficiently, and it'll take advantage because the technology that Moog used today to produce the Moog 1 wasn't around 20 years ago. Certainly not in its refined format.
No.
So there was no way that the Moog 1 could exist 20 years ago. There's probably no way that the Moog 1 could exist 10 years ago. Maybe even less. It could only exist now because other technologies have emerged or evolved. And so now we can, for years people have been saying, oh, I wish we could do what we can do with the Moog 1. 20 years ago, now we can do it. So there are going to be people that are sat around saying, oh, I wish we could do this with FM. And now we can. Now maybe we have a technology that can be implemented to provide a user interface that just makes clear sense. Maybe it's visual. Maybe it's just lots of knobs and sliders and not just lots of buttons to push and menus to dive through. God, I miss those. But it's
what the menus?
I get to the point. I mean, I've only had that DX7 now for 3 days, I think. And I've got muscle memory now. I know where I'm flying around when I want to load this up or and I get to learn a synthesizer, particularly those because that's how they work, and that's just it flows. But I've been blissfully unaware of what I've been kind of looking at what's been going on in the chat room. There's been obviously a lot of debate because I can see things scrolling past. Wagoo's just talking about the DeepMind 12. I remember seeing, what was it, 3 or 4 years ago when they launched it or previewed it at Synthfest in Sheffield. They previewed it with a virtual reality headset. Yeah, and you were able to go in and with your gloves on, you could mess around with the DM12 synth engine in this kind of 3D world. And there's a huge crowd of people around it, and everyone was saying, blimey, we didn't expect this from Behringer of all people, but there it was. And where's that come? It's just, it's gone. It's fallen by the wayside. But who knows?
Do we need that? Do we actually need to be doing a Tom Cruise Minority Report style of thing when we're making sounds?
No, not really, I suppose. I mean, making music is a very tangible, hands-on thing. Even if you're just moving a slider or pushing a button, it's that interaction. And the precision isn't there yet. But maybe when the precision is there. Cryss?
I would argue against Ben's point that yes, there is probably room for that, and I've done a lot of studying of personality psychology, and so people have different learning modalities. You can break it down like kinesthetic, audio, visual, and tester. And so the visual tester side is a little more on one side, the audio and kinesthetic. And obviously, to everybody, I'm a visual learner, and I still like touching knobs and moving things. But some of the visual interfaces that this Minority Report stuff could be actually a really good way to do it for some people.
Yeah, it's both, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry.
So if you're more of a kinesthetic learner, you're going to hate it, and you're not going to feel connected to the instrument. But if you're more a visual or a tester, that kind of interface could make a lot of sense to you, perhaps.
Yeah, it's some people are saying VR hasn't reached a critical mass yet. I think VR still, I remember when in the 80s they were talking about VR, and we had these big helmets that you put on, and it was all chunky vector graphics. But this was the future. This is how it's all going to be. And I've got a PSVR headset downstairs, and I play some of the games on there, and I think, wow, this is really cool. And then you start to think about it, and you think, well, actually, it's not that cool yet. It's good, but it's not great, and there are different experiences that you can have, and it will get better. I just think that with musical instruments, if we're talking about like VR, for example, musical instruments have always been tactile. It's always involved touch and feel, whether it's a keyboard, whether it's a guitar, whether it's drums, or it's a saxophone. I think we spoke a few weeks ago. We were talking about aftertouch on keyboards, and even when there isn't aftertouch on keyboards, or it's not one of those Yamaha ones where you could move your finger from left to right, if you're playing a fucking hot solo part on a mini Moog, your finger's going like this because it's just a natural thing for you to do. And hopefully, you might have an instrument that responds to that, but it's just how we are. Music is a very physical, interactive thing, and I think if we strip that away, then we lose the magic of it, maybe, or making music anyway. So that if VR does become a thing, it has to be at a level where it doesn't remove that hands-on experience. So if you are molding things in a virtual world, you feel the feedback. You feel the thing that you're changing. You experience it not just through your ears, but through your touch and your body. That. So I don't know.
Holodecks.
Yes, quite. I think we're a long way off.
I wonder, like virtual reality in a kind of jam session vibe. That'd be quite good. If you could look round the room and you remember you must like rehearsing with the band, and you look over to the drummer, and that kind of interaction would be quite good.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because you could incorporate both elements of it. I could be sitting here playing the guitar. You guys could be on the Fairlight and the Prophet, and we each would be touching our physical, instrument, our guitar and keyboards. And yet, like you said, like with that virtual environment, we could be sitting in a few feet away from
that'd be brilliant. That'd be brilliant.
Connection.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the the next step is that instead of actually trying to replicate the instruments, let's replicate the environment, because we can do virtual audio. We can we've got plugins now that with the little things on your headphones that when you turn your head, you're experiencing the audio from that perspective, that whole binaural kind of thing. And so maybe we can put a headset on, like you say, have a virtual jam. So we have a headset that allows us to, maybe it has a camera in the front as well, and it superimposes the virtual world like an AR.
That'd be great.
Like an AR type thing. So you see your keyboard or your guitar or your drums, but at the same time you can see Cryss and Ben and whoever else might be in there. And so we do that, and then that goes away and that matures, and then 20 years later somebody comes back and says, hey, I've now got this thing where you put on this suit and these gloves, and you actually feel the stuff, and you can touch a virtual instrument, and when Ben plays a bum note, you can punch him and you feel the punch and he feels it too, so
I love it.
but I was in the studio of David Vorhaus. He was one of the pioneers of British electronic music, back at the end of last year. And he's got a Korg wave station, and laying on top of the Korg wave station keyboard was this VR glove. And it's one of these things that you just slip on, and it's got these little pressure pads. And I said, what's that? And he said, that's my VR glove that I use with the wave station. And he morphs, using the glove, he morphs through the wave tables using this glove. And we ran out of time. We didn't have time to for him to demonstrate that. But he's into all these kind of tactile MIDI-based controllers, the Kaleidophone and everything, which he wears like a giant cock. It's just unbelievable. It's fantastic to watch him do it. It's so masculine. But I'd love to see how he uses that glove, because he does it live. He's using the glove and he's just making shapes with his hands, but each of those is programmed because he's deep into his MIDI, CC programming and everything, and each finger does something different to each of the wavetables. It's just so there's elements there, but it's going to take a few more cycles for it to be refined for us to make any kind of great use of it, I guess. But
for the future, you imagine 100 years down the line, what this emerging technology now is going to be. All the way there, it's going to be incredible. It will be. Yeah, it will feel like you're walking into a room. Yeah. I reckon.
That's the one thing. I mean, I know that it's inevitable that we are all going to leave this mortal coil at some point. And the one thing I fully accept that. I'm happy with that. I know it's going to happen. But the one thing that always bugs me is that I won't be around to see some of this really cool shit that is inevitable because we're talking about it. It's like science. Any science fiction, you look at things that are happening now. Star Trek has always been this great kind of foreteller of what's going to happen. Not because they knew what was going to happen. Not like Arthur C. Clarke when he wrote all those wonderful books. He knew it was going to happen. He just thought, wouldn't it be great if that was the way it was? And we read this stuff and go, yeah, it'd be great if we actually made that. And so they go ahead and make it. So
it's life imitating art.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So we're talking about this stuff now, and in 50 years' time, they'll say, there's a bunch of old fools on YouTube are saying that we, one day we'll sit in a virtual room with our virtual buddies jamming. And nowadays it's just like, yeah, of course we do that because that's what everybody does. And
time stuff. That's in the next decade.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Hopefully.
And the good thing too is when we think about when we started playing music all those decades ago, to think about what's available to us now, I couldn't dream of having some of the gear that we have available to us. That when I started, I wouldn't have been able to conceive it.
No.
It is incredible.
Well, I remember when I was
you've got around you, when you do finally sit in your studio, the possibilities are incredible.
Yeah. But I remember when I was, so it was 83, so I was about 13 years old, and I just discovered Howard Jones, and at that was at the point in my life when I thought I just need technology to help me make music. So I know how to play the drums, but that's just one thing. I want to make all of it. I want to make the bass sounds, I want to make the lead sounds and the melodies and the drums and everything. How am I going to do this? And I was oblivious at the time to most of the technology. And then I see this guy, Howard Jones, who's standing in front of a couple of racks of keyboards, and he's making music from this gear. How is he doing that? There must be something. And I thought there must be, like a synthesizer where you press a key and you get this bass line that you've recorded and it plays it back. And all the time I'm thinking of these ways of doing it. What I'm actually thinking of is a sequencer. And that technology was already around in primitive form. And then, a few years later it's doing it. And by the time I catch up with that, I was like, oh, wow, yeah, it's really actually, you can make a huge amount of music, one man, and a few keyboards and a sequencer, and that's what Howard was doing. He'd got a Jupiter 8, a Pro 1, an 808, I think it was, and a couple of other bits of gear, and a hardware sequencer. And you got these lines programmed in, and then everything else he would play and just drop bits in and out as he went and did it. And that was just me thinking, how does he do that? And then of course, that technology exists, and we're thinking about this now. Where are we going to go? And in 10 years' time, we'll be saying, "Oh, do you remember when?"
I think there's a point that we touched on last week when we mentioned AI and sequencers that have an element of creativity in them would be absolutely fantastic. You imagine being in that rehearsal room again with people, and they come up with something that you hadn't thought of, and it just takes the idea in a whole new direction. And we're working in isolation. We haven't got that. We've only got our own heads. So for the AI to chip in with an idea that creates something new, that is the future of music. Solitary music creation is AI tools that can spark your inspiration off, because they throw into the pot.
Wouldn't you feel? Sorry. I would have a massive guilt complex if I did that and came up with something. I thought, wow, this is really good, and then I shared it with someone and said, listen to what I've made, and yet maybe 50% of it was an AI program that had come up with it. I would feel incredibly uneasy. It's like when I used to play live, and I haven't played live for years, and you'll be able to speak more to this than I will. But when I used to play live, we were just a live band. There was just me on drums. There was a guy playing keyboards live. There was guys playing guitars and bass live, and that was that. And then in the 90s, when I started to get into having some of this technology, I said, "Oh, we can add strings. We don't have a string section, but shall we have some strings? Shall we do this song by whoever that's got a piano part going through it, or a string part going through it, or brass?" We used to do Our House by Madness. So that's got brass and strings all the way through it. It's a classic kind of pop song, but it's got brass. You do it with guitars and bass and drums and maybe one keyboard player, and it doesn't quite sound right. So I said, what if we use this stuff? And so I sat down, I found a MIDI file of Our House. I stripped away everything apart from the strings and the brass, left a click track in there that would only come to me. I'd press play with a foot switch. I'd get the click track. I'd count the band in. We'd play it. Everyone was going, wow, that sounds great. They've got a brass section going. There's strings coming in. It sounds fantastic. And I always felt guilty because to me, it was like cheating. All right. So I'd not even programmed the shit. I just copied a MIDI file that I'd found on the internet, made a few tweaks, and just stripped everything away. And I used to think, God, this sounds brilliant, but I kind of felt guilty about doing it. Would you not feel that with AI?
No, well, I don't suffer from that with live performance. I'm quite happy to use every bit of technology available to me to make it as good as it can be and as easy as it can be. I don't want to stand there doing nothing, because that is torturous. To be part of a live performance and not actually do anything would be horrendous. So I'm always involved in it, but I'm quite happy to use technology to its advantages.
Have you heard of a band called Sleaford Mods?
I have.
Right. Cryss is shaking his head. So Sleaford Mods are a duo, Jason and Andrew. Jason is the vocal performer because he doesn't sing. And Jason is the music guy. Now Jason's actually a pretty good musician, but their whole MO is that they build these backing tracks, and they build them in the studio, and they can be quite intricate sometimes. Sometimes they're just very simple drums and a bass line or something. And then Jason, it's kind of like, I want to say it's like punk rapping. Because it's not sung. Jason's more of a poet than he is a lyricist, and he writes great books. But when they go out live, it's the two of them, and literally no word, I shit you not, 2 beer crates, a laptop on top. Andrew stands there for the entire show with his left hand in his pocket. He's got a bottle of beer in his right hand. He presses the space bar. The track starts, and Andrew's just there like this, just bopping along. Jason is doing his whole thing. Just Google, we'll go on YouTube, you'll see it. And Jason does his, and it's fantastic. It's brilliant. It's visceral. It's punk. It's of the moment. It's socially aware and whatever. But it's just 2 guys on the stage. There's not even they don't even have a backdrop. There's no lighting. It's just 2 guys and a laptop. And I can watch that and I feel, I don't, if that was like, I know there are bands, big name bands, like, I saw Janet Jackson at Glastonbury, all of that backing track pretty much. And I feel awful because that's horrible. But when 2 guys unashamedly say, this is what we do, and they just do it, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. But it's, seriously, if anyone hasn't heard of Sleaford Mods, they are very British, so you might not quite get them, but they do tour in the States, and they've toured around. They are just one of the best bands ever. Love them.
Yeah, well, Electro 80s have 2 laptops on stage, so anybody with a bit of sense is going to realise that a lot of that is computer generated to need two laptops. But I wouldn't go on stage and stand there and pretend. I've seen people
I
doing
always
that.
used to think that Pet Shop Boys, right? So I'm a huge Pet Shop Boys fan, and I've seen them a number of times live, but most of the time it's from way back somewhere. And so, on stage, they're not the most dynamic of bands. Cryss stands in the same place for the entire set, with usually just 1 controller and a screen in front of him. And you hear all this music, and you know that Cryss is not playing all of that music himself. You know that a lot of it is pre-recorded or sequenced and then played back. And so I always thought that Cryss was either likely to be miming or maybe just playing the simplest part of each track.
Yeah.
Last year, I went to see them at a warm-up gig, 200 people, just in this small club in London, and I stood right at the front of the stage, and Cryss is right there in front of me, and I can see what he's doing. And he's got, I think it's a custom program, because he's classically trained, and it's all scored. It's not even, I was just expecting to see main stage or Ableton. Wow. It's all scored, and he is playing a part, and he's playing various parts, but he's playing he's sight playing to this score. So I mean, there's no reason why you would have that on there and not be doing what he's doing. He's clearly playing stuff. No, but it's a facade that you think, oh, it's just Cryss, just Cryss being Cryss, dark glasses, funny hat, just stands there, with a couple of hands. But he's actually playing stuff, and he's very. It really surprised me in a very nice way.
Yeah.
On the other side of the, I remember when I was probably 17 or so. I'd already been playing guitar for a while, and it was because it was a little bit hard to get a hold of some of these live performances. I didn't even have internet for a while after that. But to find some of the performance of the old bands that I enjoyed, like Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd, so finally got a copy of The Song Remains the Same by Led Zeppelin. I don't remember what year that was, 74, 75 maybe somebody else knows. And so I'm like, man, this is awesome. I love Led Zeppelin, some of my favorite records, just great in the studio. And then got to watch, for the first time, a live performance of them. And I was so horrified. I can't even tell you. Like, this was my favorite band at the time. I was like, what happened? This is so sloppy. This is so, loose and all over the place and out of tune. And I couldn't, and they're probably all drunk or high anyway, but it was kind of a funny thing. But when I think back to that and what we see a lot today, where using some elements, tracks or stuff, isn't such a big deal to me. But when you lip sync a concert or your production is so quantized that there's no humanness in it. Man, I will sloppy Led Zeppelin over that any day.
And I think technology again has advanced, hasn't it? So back in the 80s, you had bands using early sequences on stage, whether it was either a reel to reel, like Depeche Mode used to have their drum and maybe there was a bass line on there on the reel to reel, and then eventually people started getting brave enough to use sequences on stage. I remember a Level 42 gig where their main Level 42 are some of the tightest, best musicians that could ever play together. They are just superb. But they were using technology, and Mike Lindup's rig had, a sequence. I forget what one it was. I think it might have been a QX1 or something, and it failed on stage. And back then there wasn't a backup. So nowadays, you have this redundancy thing where if the Mac goes down, this other Mac is already there, and it just cuts in and whatever. It just failed. So this sequence that was playing something like a chord riff and arpeggiation or something, and Mike's using both his hands and doing other things. The sequencer breaks down, but the band who realise what's happened say, okay, well, we'll just carry on playing, and nobody really knew that anything had happened because they just they were that good and they just carried on, and the audience was like, oh, that's part of the show. And again, the acceptance of sequenced music and backing tracks nowadays is almost it's quite shocking, really, in a way. I was talking to my daughter last night. She wanted to stay up late for this concert. This global thing that Lady Gaga organised. So she likes a lot of these Korean pop bands, and there's one particular that was called Super M or something. And we were talking. I said, "Well, why do you want to stay up till midnight to watch it? There's just a bunch of lads, all dressed up in fancy clothes, dancing on the stage, lip syncing." And she's like, "Yeah, and I was like, "What? I would have been horrified if I'd gone to see a band, when I was your age, and all you told me that they were miming." Yeah. I actually thought so. My stepmother. I always remind her of this. My stepmother. This sounds really weird, but it isn't. My stepmother used to babysit me, all right? It wasn't like that. That's not how my parents' marriage ended. But she used to come and babysit me. This was in the mid to late 70s. And, we'd be sat there and I was, got to watch Top of the Pops on Thursday night. And she said, what do you want to watch that for? It's just, they're just stood there, they're miming. And I was like, no, they're not. They're not miming. They're actually playing. They're in there. And she goes, no, they're just stood there, they're miming to a song. And I was like, no, and it just ruined it for me. Then she told me that when you listen to the radio, it wasn't the band that you were listening to, it was a recording. I was like, no, I always thought the band was in the studio playing. Such was the naivety of my young mind. And it just destroyed it for me. But, I speak to my daughter and she's like, so, yeah, they lip sync because they're dancing. How could they sing when they're doing all these crazy dance moves? Well, yeah, I suppose. But surely, are you not there for the music? Obviously not. So.
Yeah, it's become so performance-driven.
Yeah.
I just remember, I don't know how many years ago it was, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when David Lee Roth had rejoined Van Halen and they were starting to tour again. So by that time, when they would do Jump, they would just have a track play the synthesizer parts on it, which I didn't really care for that. But one of their tech guys got the sample rate wrong, I think it was. And so it comes out playing like a quarter of a pitch off or something.
I think I've heard about this.
Yeah, it's a crazy to watch them because they start out of tune of the track that's playing behind them, and Eddie's trying to depress his whammy bar just a little bit to try to be in tune, and it was a complete disaster. They should have but they tried to limp their way through it. It was man.
I've seen some acts sometimes where the technology has failed to start at the right point. Or they've just said, well, okay, hold the hands up, the technology's fucked up. Let's go back to the beginning. And you think, okay, well, fair dues. You're not trying to hide it. But yeah.
That's a better way to do it. Is like then everybody can have just a good laugh and a chuckle about it. And if on stage you don't take yourself too seriously, you can go.
Yeah, we're only human.
We were But then sometimes when people take themselves too seriously, then you get into trouble.
That's very true. Right. Well, I think that's a show. I think we've run over. Not that we have a finite time, but yeah. That's good. I think we covered everything we wanted to cover. So, any closing comments? Have you got anything planned for the week, lads?
Go ahead, Ben.
I'm going to be working on Electro 80s stuff. I've still got my side project going on. And after my Korg experiment, I've come up with a pretty interesting tune for that. It's got a really weird groove to it, so I'm quite excited about that at the moment. So I'll no doubt be working on that this week.
How about you, Cryss? You got anything lined up for this week?
Yeah, I'm working on all the mind-numbingly boring stuff involved with creating a sound set. So the sounds are mostly done, and I had been taking and reordering stuff from a chart and
paper
leveling and writing the PDFs.
Wow.
Cool.
But I got to get it done, and it's good because it gets me. There's a limit because once I get that, my buddy's Prophet, then I got to just really start jamming on that and get that stuff done. Yeah. So I'll keep me busy. How about you?
What about you, Robbie?
Well, I've got a parcel of Fairlight parts arriving hopefully this week, which will go into the one that I'm working on. I've got another package that I've just packed up to send to a guy in the UK that bought a system off us last year, so that I did all that today. I'm back to my day job tomorrow because I've had all of this week off to do all of this, and I think now I've actually got everything here kind of hooked up. I've even got my modules over here, like my TX7 and my RX17. They're all kind of wired in, but what I've found is that now having all of this hardware now up and running and live, I'm woefully lacking in audio inputs and USB connections and MIDI ports.
I was going to say, you need a desk.
I mean, I've got
a Yamaha TF.
Well, I was looking at there's a Yamaha DMP7, which is this era, but digital mixer. I thought maybe, but right under here I've got a UX256, which has 6 ins and outs. So that's all of the synths bar the MS101, which goes in through USB. So I've had to put a USB hub in there to take the MS101 and the USB MIDI hub. And that was something I need to ask. Do you remember TG ports? Serial MIDI ports, the little round ports. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They were
like the Apple connector.
So they're sometimes called the Apple connector. Sometimes they were called the TG port. They were usually on backs of Roland and Yamaha stuff.
Yeah.
So this MIDI box that I've got under here has got 2 of those, and they can handle through one port. They can handle 16 in, 16 out, and which is really efficient. So I've got one of them running the SC88 module, but I've got one spare, and I've been searching everywhere for a way to convert that serial port into something else like USB or something, but I can't find anything. So I'm going to try and see if I can sort that out. But day job it is.
That should exist. I should imagine. You get all these like retro Apple people who want to connect USB keyboards to the stuff. That must.
Well, if we can do it with a Fairlight, we must be able to do it with something similar. So I'll ask Andrei, see if he can knock something up. But other than that, I just need more interfaces. I've already been looking at 18 input audio interfaces, and nobody seems to do big MIDI patch bays. I can't seem to find a really decent MIDI patch bay that's USB that takes 16 in, 16 outs. That doesn't cost the earth. Like Moog do some really good stuff, but it's not cheap. So I should be scouting Amazon and the like. But anyway, there we go. Thanks ever so much to everyone for watching, and We've had some good numbers, so that's always good to see. There's lots of chat going on. I'm sorry, I kind of took my eye off the ball there. I know there's been lots of people going in and commenting on the things that we've been talking about. So apologies for maybe not reacting as much as we normally do. But thanks for your contribution. It's great. And I shall re-watch this when I have to do the edit for the chapters and stuff tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. I shall go in and I shall watch with the chat and catch up. But thanks ever so much for joining us. We'll be hopefully here, same time, same place next week. With either with or again. I mean, we've had also technical issues. We had, I forget how many drop frames did we have last week. It was the hundreds of thousands. We've had 228. So either the internet's not being caned or my kids are doing what they were told and not streaming movies. So. Oh. We're not good, but we're getting there. I need to work out how to get everything working properly, but we'll get there one day. Cool. Excellent. All right, guys. Great to talk to you. And thanks to everyone in the... hang on. What's this? Sasquatch, remove your license numbers from the Korg segment. Oh, God, yeah. I shall... Oh, Ben's gone. Ben's crashed. Look, he's frozen. Yes, I need to remove my license numbers. Oh, how am I going to do that? Shit. Okay. Right, I'll figure that one out. Anyway, thanks ever so much. Ben seems to have gone. He's lost his connection, so I'll say goodbye on his behalf. We'll see you next time. Thanks ever so much. Take care. Bye-bye.